Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at SF DocFest. Thanks again for being here. We've kind of been excited to kick off another kind of season of really cool independent documentaries from around the world. And you just had the opportunity to see the wonderful film Jesszilla. And we have some of the filmmaking team in here. Hey, everybody.
Hi. Hey.
Very cool. Could you each introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'll go first. I'm Emily. I am the director.
Hi, I'm Katie. I was the editor.
And I'm Paul as the director of photography.
Very cool. Well, welcome. Thanks again for sharing this really terrific story. Maybe a good place to start is, Emily, how did you kind of first kind of find out about what was going on and decided that there was kind of a larger documentary you wanted to make?
Yeah, so Paul and I worked on making a short on Jess in 2016 after I saw an article in like the local New Jersey, New York paper about a little girl who had just won a belt. And so in our film, there's a picture of her coach, Dawn, holding her up with the belt. And I saw that picture and I was like, who is this child? So I wrote to the woman who wrote the article and asked to be put in touch with a guardian or parent, and ultimately was put in touch with Pedro. And yeah, from there, we had some meetings and discussions off camera for a while before we decided to move forward with making a short film. And then that short film ended up in the New York Times and people loved it because they're both such characters. And yeah, Paul and I were kind of like, well, what would it look like if we followed her to the Olympics? Like, do we think she's going to make it? Like, we didn't know what to expect, but we liked the idea of sort of doing almost like an up series on a young athlete to see, how things would come into play as she got older. If, her gender sexuality would derail her dreams, if she would change course, just normal teenage stuff, or if she would continue to be as passionate about boxing and, continue to head to the Olympics. And I think we were surprised when like every year we would film and Jess was just more determined than ever to get to the Olympics. And it was a real treat to follow her and her father and get to know them along the way.
Very cool. And it looks like we have another crew member in. Let me admit Ben, and we'll welcome him here. Hey there, Ben. We're live and in the middle of the Q&A. Welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Ben Kynes. I'm the producer of Jesszilla. Excited to be here. Sorry, I'm a little late.
No worries. It's part of the kind of fun of these sorts of Q&As. Emily was just kind of telling us about the kind of genesis of the story. I'm sure there's a few more questions I want to kind of dig into, but I imagine many people in the audience are wondering how Jess is doing and what's the kind of postscript for the film so far.
Yeah, so we're happy to report that Jess is still with us. When she originally got the diagnosis and the doctor said she would probably only have 12 months. That was in July of 2021. When we're doing this interview, it's currently April of 2023. And I spoke to Pedro a couple weeks ago, and he had actually taken her to shoot hoops at the local basketball court, which is amazing. And she made a few in. And so, she still is doing treatment. She's had 8 brain surgeries, which is, I don't want to minimize what she's been through. But I've joked with her that she has been upgraded from fighter to warrior because she just continues to not give in, keep fighting. The two of them continue to seek out, new treatments. And yeah, that's basically where they're at. They're looking for studies that they can participate in because unfortunately there is not a lot of treatment available for her diagnosis.
Oh, wow. Well, Paul, I had a question for you. Boxing's kind of a sport that's just inherently really visual. What was the kind of approach that you and Emily decided to take to kind of, capture this, and like what was the kind of motivations behind the aesthetic you chose?
Well, we started off with very minimal resources as far as bringing like a really as far as putting a look into it. So we wanted her story to feel like it deserved as much attention as like an actual movie or something, and to feel cinematic. So part of it was choosing to do the movie in a wider aspect ratio. So it is 2:3:9, which is something you'd associate with like a bigger movie. And using some slow motion techniques and stuff like that to make things feel a little more cinematic. But I think really a priority for us was to be present and to try and capture as much of the genuine relationship between Pedro and Jesszilla as possible. Because to me, I think that's what attracted me most to the project, and what felt the most special and unique to me is just seeing the two of them interact with each other. So that was something that always came to the forefront for me, was like, what are we honoring this relationship between the two of them?
Well, I guess it raises kind of interesting question. There's always these discussions in documentary circles about, how does the camera kind of change, the interactions and just like ways people live. Was there any point in time where the camera wound up kind of affecting, either training or things like that? Or was she just so focused that it's just like, eventually did your guys' presence just disappear? At what point in time, you always think of this kind of theatricality and bravado with the sport. And so like, did the camera at all like encourage performance at different points in time? Or like, how did you balance that out, for the nuanced story that you told?
To be honest, I don't really, I'll let you chime in, Paul. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, I don't really feel in the beginning it affected their performance that much. I remember though, our first nationals, you and I were like hiding from Jess because she was nervous and she was a kid, and we like didn't want the camera to add more pressure. So Paul and I talked about like how we could film this and like hide from her. So that's why like that first nationals is like very, in some ways, like very removed. And then as she got older, she actually got more comfortable with like the camera and like our presence. And I think you see it in the interviews too, where like I ask her a question and she kind of like makes fun of me. She's like, that's a crazy question, Emily. And then she snaps into interview mode and she's like, I am definitely not going to give up. And you can tell that like this kid learned, like we accidentally gave her media training. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say generally with the verite footage, she from the get-go was pretty comfortable with the camera. And some people can be very guarded, but she was very open and never, performing the way that a child would perform, but not performing the way that you'd expect that some people would perform for a camera. And yeah, but to echo what Emily said about the first nationals is that we did try to give her space so that she wasn't thinking about us too much during that first national competition. So much of that was just us on a long lens from somewhere in the audience.
And then Katie, given kind of some of the process that Emily had shared to me, like how did you kind of navigate kind of sifting through all this kind of verite footage? There's kind of like a chronological aspect to things, but also like at what point in time, how did you guys determine like separating this feature versus the kind of story that was told in the short?
Well, I'd say the process editorially on this project was really interesting because initially we had an entirely different film structured editorially. And so we had a sort of very like non-linear kind of storyline established, where we were kind of bouncing, back and forth between present day as she was getting closer and closer to making the junior Olympic team, with then flashing back to, similar scenes in her childhood to really sort of like, to juxtapose kind of the difference in like how serious her training had gotten and how she was developing as a person and as a fighter. And when the diagnosis came about, we had to, obviously huddle and figure out, okay, how is this changing the story that we are telling? And so we actually restructured the entire film post-diagnosis. So that was a really interesting process of, sort of looking through a new lens at all of this material that we had been working with for a couple of years and sort of reframing it to be more reflective of the situation that Jess and Pedro were in suddenly. So it was kind of strange because it's, we kind of jokingly say like, oh, we edited 2 films for this project. But there's so much learning that, that happens in that process, and certainly like no time wasted. Like it all just, when we decided to restructure, we were all so engrossed in the material and like so familiar with all of the themes and the things that we wanted, the essence of the story didn't change, but the way that we structured it and laid it out for the audience did. So it was an interesting moment to kind of have to like rethink things in a different way, but I feel really happy with where we got to.
Well, yeah, it turned out awesome. So kind of followed the thread of the story to where you got it. Question for Emily and Ben, when you're making a documentary that involves, a minor, a child, what are kind of like some of the things you have to kind of keep in mind to navigate kind of telling the story, that's there, but also, I guess, dealing with a kid or giving them the space? Like, was that something that just kind of, was that a strategy that kind of developed over time, or was there something from the get-go of what you guys implemented to kind of balance things out?
Yeah, the ethics of working with a minor was something that was really important to me and weighed heavily on me from the beginning. And so part of the conversations we had before we even made the short was, one, I wanted to make sure that, this was not a helicopter parent. And when I went to the gym to first meet them, I saw Pedro very laid back, sort of just like, yeah, like there's Jess, and Jess just like doing bag work and then going right into push-ups and then right into sit-ups and being like, Poppy, how many rounds was that? And then like going back, and it was so obvious that this man was just like along for the ride. So that was sort of like my first like, okay, great. This is not a parent trying to live vicariously through his child. And then the second thing was we had these long conversations before we made the short about the fact that, there are going to be many opinions. Our best case scenario was that we became a New York Times op doc, which ended up happening. And like, how would he handle, the negative comments? Was that something that he was concerned about? Also, the fact that attention, from she's so cute, she's so dynamic, like people might want to put her on TV and that might leave as fast as it came. Like, was that something he felt he could navigate as a parent? And then, as we went along in the process, Jess was always a part of it. I always wanted to make sure that she knew that if she was uncomfortable at any point, if she didn't want to answer questions at any point, she could always say no. That was okay. And when she got her diagnosis, we, as like the adults in the room, were all a mess. And the film in many ways was the last thing we were thinking about, because, we had been with this family for 5 years. Like we love these people, we care about them. And Jess was the one who was like, when are we filming next? And because of her, we made this film. Like, she was the one that kind of then led the conversation of, okay, well, this is no longer a film about you going to the Olympics. So what is this film to you? What do you want to say? And like, with her, I think we sort of then were able to get a handle of, okay, this is what we'll ask. These are the kinds of questions to honor, what her wishes were, while still having our own artistic integrity. And Ben, you can feel free to chime in if I missed anything.
Yeah, and I think too, from like a logistics point of view, there are a few things like we would go find a studio that was closer to them. Like we're just a bit more accommodating, I think, than telling a adult participant, we're going to be here, please be here. So it's just being a little bit more flexible. There's a point in time I was babysitting for an interview shoot just to allow us the space to capture those sound bites. And then from like a event perspective, there are a lot of things we wanted to capture, like Jess at school or after school events, but in terms of getting like permission to film, that was much harder. So we had to sort of work with what we're given, boxing events, gyms that we could reach out to establish relationships with. So that definitely shaped our narrative too.
I'll
Very cool.
also just add quickly that boundaries were really important when filming with a minor. Just being aware of, this is a child, what she wants to share matters. Same with Pedro. I don't think she really wanted us at school. And that was something that we wanted to honor. At a certain point, it became clear that she did not want me following her around a tournament. I was like her weird aunt with a camera that she like wasn't about. And we even talked about like, well, maybe, we stop filming when she makes the junior Olympic team and then pick this film up once she's gone pro. So she can have that space to be a teenager at these tournaments. So there was an evolving conversation because we want the best for her. So yeah, we had to navigate kind of how we make a film, but still honor and realize that this is a child that's opening up her life to us. And there needs to be a bit more boundaries as a result.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for making the film, everyone. One of the things I always remind our audiences is that we're lucky enough that filmmakers like you all share their films early in their lives, their public lives with us. And so, our role as audiences are to kind of go out there and kind of help spread the word. So like, how can folks continue to kind of follow the film? And also how can, if people want to be able to support Jess and her family, how can they do that?
Yeah. First off, you can follow us on social media. It's Jesszilla the Film on Instagram. Katie is the reason we have an Instagram because she made me do it. But we post everything there, all the like schedules. If we're premiering, if we have an event, like you'll be able to follow all the news there. And then on our website, jesszillahthefilm.com, there's also a place on the site where it says help Pedro and Jess. And you will be able to click that and donate to them. We're working with the Christian Rivera Foundation too, who's helping support Jess and Pedro. But whatever is on our site will go directly to Jess and Pedro. So just letting everybody know that this is a way that they can help if the story moves them.
Well, very well. Well, thank you again for capturing and all the best with the film. And please send our thanks to Jess and her family.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.